everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, and I am on the road this week again, and I am excited to be able to do this wherever I am, which is awesome. And today, the message today is all about how food gets made. The little tiny bees that help make our food grow. And I'm excited to introduce you to Brian Peterson, who is a fifth grade teacher who has received numerous awards, including the Presidential Award for Excellence, the Michigan State Teachers Association Elementary Teacher of the Year. He was named Crane's Notable LGBTQ Business Leader, and he's the founder of Bees in the D that will be breaking ground on the Michigan Pollinators Center. Hello, Brian. How are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm so excited as I told you before, I'm allergic to bee stings, but I'm excited to learn about them because they're so important to the food system.
Definitely.
So just before we got on the show, I asked you how long you've been in Detroit. And so tell us about that, but then tell us about Bees in the D. What is the organization and what is the organization?
Sure. So I've been a teacher for 23 years in the Metro Detroit area. And then I became a beekeeper 14 years ago through the generosity of the Women's Garden Club of Rochester, which is the district I teach in. I went up on Beaver Island and I learned beekeeping and I caught the bug and just fell in love with beekeeping. And then eventually I moved to the city. That was about 9 years ago. So we've been living in downtown Detroit for 9 years. And 6 years ago, I decided that I needed to be a voice for the bees because I'm going to tell you, beekeeping for me is my yoga. It's been there for me when I needed it. And then as the populations were declining in our bee numbers, I was like, I need to help them. So I want to be a voice for the bees. So that's when we started Bees in the D about 6 years ago.
Okay.
And so that's kind of in a nutshell, the history of me and beekeeping.
Okay, so you said the decline in bees, and I know I've seen this in the news for years now. So can you tell us a little bit about that and why the bees are important?
Yeah, so the decline has been happening for, at least a couple decades, and there's many reasons behind that. Of course, with pesticides, of course, with losing land, and then, of course, a lot of diseases that we've become a global society. So bees are now getting parasites like the varroa mites and a lot of diseases. And so that's why their population has been declining. And then that puts us a little bit on edge because bees are very responsible for our food industry. They say 1 in every 3 bites that you put in your mouth depends on pollinators. And
Wow.
If you want the diversity of food in your diet, we need the power of the pollinators. And so I really educate about that, not only for the food industry, but it also for the ecosystem. If you think about it, other animals need to eat too.
Right.
And the bees are pollinating their food, or they are food for other animals. So they're crucial to both the food industry and the ecosystems.
Wow. And you don't think about that. You think about the bees that are annoying you flying around, but they're also so cool.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Tracy. That's one thing. I just get so excited about this. That's one thing that we do educate about because people don't realize the diversity of bees and wasps. Just in North America, there's over 4,000 species of bees.
What?
Yeah, in the world. 20,000.
Wow.
So we don't think about that because we lump them all into one category. And
Right.
just like you were saying, you're at a picnic and there's those quote unquote bees that are bothering you and in your personal bubble. Those aren't bees at all. Those are actually a wasp called the yellow jacket. And so that's why I like to be a voice for the bees, because they're being blamed for something that they don't do. They actually are the ones that allow us to enjoy almonds and strawberries and blueberries and apples, and the list goes on and on. But I want to even take you back a little bit. Like, you got to think outside of the box with the bees a little bit, because one of the main crops that we feed our cattle industry is alfalfa. And in order to plant alfalfa, you need it to go to seed. If it's not pollinated, it doesn't go to seed. So even when you're enjoying some dairy or some beef, the bees had a part in that. And so it goes beyond just our vegetables and fruits. The bees are really crucial to basically our whole food industry.
Wow, that is a big, huge learning curve today, just for me. That's amazing. And it's so we want, and those wildflowers, actually somebody gave me a little box of wildflowers, or it's a dried one, and says, just go plop this in your backyard and it will pollinate, right? It'll grow and you can have some wildflowers. So those are so important.
Oh, they are crucial. If you were here in Detroit with me, I literally am handing out wildflower packets all the time, because the bottom line is you're providing resources for our pollinators, for all of our bees. And when you're providing resources for them, that helps strengthen them. And then they can help, with some of the foods, plants that we grow for food. And so, yes, planting native is so important because, like I said, of that diversity of bees. Many bees rely on certain plants, and many bees have different ways of getting it. So there's long-tongued bees, short-tongued bees, and so different flowers have different shapes that different pollinators have a symbiotic relationship with. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg, Tracy. I mean, it is just mind-boggling how nature is so perfectly woven together. But unfortunately, sometimes other things can get involved, which can throw off that natural process.
Right. It reminds me of a story of a plane going over South Carolina and destroying a crop because I don't remember why it was, and it destroyed the bees.
Yeah, and that's something that it's so hard to have that balance, because we also not only put the bees aside and go to a bigger category of insects. There's a lot of insects that are referred to as pests, but then there's also the beneficial insects. And so we have to be careful, because when we are trying to, get rid of some of the pest insects, unfortunately, we also can harm our beneficial insects. Mosquitoes are a great example of that. When we fog for mosquitoes, because we're, sick of swatting at them around the fire at night, unfortunately, when you fog, it doesn't just target mosquitoes, it can target other insects as well, and other animals. And so we really need to find a good balance that allows us to keep our beneficial insects healthy and safe. And just understand that sometimes in nature, there's going to be some coexisting and sometimes a little bit of an annoyance with some of them.
Just means that I need to put my citronella on my pressure points instead of going out and fogging mosquitoes.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you just you're smart about things. You read what's in it, because there are some natural remedies. There also are better times to do it. You want to watch out for wind, because it can take that, what you're fogging and drift into other areas. True. And so there's other factors to consider as well.
That's so true. And that's a whole nother conversation too, of different crops that are growing, and we don't want to go there today.
Oh, you could fill up the rest of this day talking to me about bees, because you'll end up having to cut me off, because I'm just so excited to share things.
So I want to go back, because you started gardening. So what was the name of the gardening group?
The Women's Rochester Garden Club. And they had some funds from doing fundraisers and wanted to send an elementary teacher up to be trained with beekeeping, hoping that I would bring back some of the knowledge to the classroom. And so I happily did that, but then I fell in love with it so much that it is just evolved into this incredible mission that we have of being a voice for the bees and sharing about the importance of their conservation and their education.
So Bees in the D, 6 years old, you said. And now when I learned about you from Greg DeSandy of the Huntington Place, which is the convention center in downtown Detroit, he said you've got beehives on 40 buildings. Is that right?
So we have beehives all over the place, not just on building tops, but we now are up to about 220 hives at
Wow.
over 70 locations across 5 counties in Southeast Michigan. But many of those, especially in the heart of the city, are right up on the rooftop. So, like the convention center,
Mhm.
they have a beautiful green roof, but it doesn't even need to be on a green roof. We're on like the Shinola Hotel, the Foundation Hotel, many different buildings. And what's fun with that is, especially the hotels and restaurants, they then use the honey that's right above their heads on the roof in their menu and in their cocktails. And so it doesn't get fresher than that. And it's just a perfect partnership. And if you don't know about Detroit, the urban gardens are just booming. I mean, there's so much green space in Detroit now. And it's a natural fit to have pollinators, because what that does is then increase the amount of fruits and vegetables that are growing in these urban gardens. And most of that food then goes back to the communities that those gardens are a part. So the neighborhoods are getting fresh, organic food. And we even bring in chefs that help educate them how to cook it. It's just a
Oh, that's
really
awesome.
cool, like, partnership. And there's so many grassroots organizations that work together. And that's what I love about Detroit. Detroit takes care of Detroit, all these grassroots efforts. So we work with these urban gardens to help educate about how to grow the food, but then also about our pollinators and how they're essential to the development of that food.
Now, and the urban gardens are, and because I was just in Pittsburgh and I went and toured the top of that convention center, and they're building the raised beds on top of the convention center. Are you also doing raised beds of just these flowers to get the bees there, or on all of these buildings as well?
So there's a little bit of a misconception with beehives up on building tops, because
Okay.
people think that they need plants right there in front of them. But
Okay.
bees will go from a 3 to 5 mile radius of their hives. So the hives don't have to be right at the garden even. They can be adjacent, or, just down the street. But there are more and more buildings, much like you talked about there in Pittsburgh, that are starting to do gardening up on rooftops. Why not? It's a wasted space. And then the green roofs, much like the convention center here and a couple other buildings we're on, they really help with water retention. They help with heating and cooling of the building. I mean, it really is a wonderful model, and it's so exciting to see so many more green roof initiatives that are happening, because then also it helps our pollinators. And when I say pollinators, I'm not just talking about bees. I'm talking about butterflies. I'm talking about hummingbirds, hummingbird moths. There's so many different kinds of pollinators that it helps.
So that, I mean, and I just think flying over and seeing the rooftops being, instead of those gray, ugly tops that you always see, or looking at your hotel room and that's what you see, right? It would be so much nicer to see green and flowers and things like that.
It's amazing. And a lot of the chefs too are starting to do their own beds with herbs and even some
Mhm.
vegetables, so that they're growing some of the food, or vegetables that are used in the menu right there on location. I mean, that's just amazing to me, to think of how fresh it is. I mean, it literally was picked that day.
Yeah. And that's so nice because it literally is going right into your food then. And I mean, I know the convention center can't grow enough on the top of their roof to feed everybody that the convention center feeds, but at least it can incorporate it into a lot of their menus.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's you've got to start somewhere. And I
Exactly.
mean, if you can offset a little bit of that with doing, a few raised beds, like you said, why wouldn't you?
Right, exactly. Now, the other day I was on your Instagram handle, which is bees in the D, and you were eating a honeycomb like right from the hive. Like, dude, really?
Yeah,
So,
I'm 100% volunteer. So I
okay.
everything that I do is volunteer, but that's my payment right there. A little bit of liquid gold. I was cleaning up some of the hives and doing a hive inspection. This was on the Shinola Hotel, actually, right on Woodward
Uh-huh.
Avenue, which is our main avenue here in Detroit. And I had to clear what's known as burr comb, or a little bit of comb that was just kind of in the way, and it was just saturated with honey. So of course I got, and It is just amazing. It's much like that feeling when you garden and you eat a vegetable right out of your garden. It's just so fresh and amazing. And of course, coming right out of the hive, it's still warm. It's just
Wow.
it's my payment.
That sounds so good. Now, okay, so let's talk about there's honey, there's local honey. So people say buy local honey because of your allergies or whatever. Is that a true thing?
Yeah. So first of all, I always tell people buy local because you're supporting your local beekeepers. It
Hmm.
allows them to continue to do what they're doing because there's a lot more expenses in beekeeping than what people realize, especially with a lot of the newer issues that have developed. But there are a lot of scientists that do believe exactly what you're saying because people don't realize this. There's trace amounts of pollen from every single flower that those bees have visited in that honey. You can actually do DNA of honey, and we're doing that right now. We haven't gotten the results yet. It will literally tell us every single species of flower that those
Wow.
bees went to in that one jar of honey. But it's kind of like I use this story as an example to explain how it helps with your allergies. As a fifth grade teacher, I have kids that have allergies, especially peanut butter. Peanuts are a big, people are allergic to them. I had a child in my class that they were doing a therapy where they get a drop of peanut oil underneath their tongue every so often because it's a small enough dose that it doesn't affect them, but it's building up a tolerance in their system so that eventually they're not as severely allergic to the peanuts if they eat them. And so the
Right.
theory is kind of the same. You're getting trace amounts of that pollen into your body, and your body starts adapting to those trace amounts of pollen, and then you're not as allergic or your allergies are at bay a little bit more. And there are a lot of people that swear by it. I mean, honey is a superfood. It is better for you when you have a cough than cough syrup. I mean, it is something that scientists constantly are studying because bees are just amazing. And I know I'm kind of rambling here, but
No, you're
I just
good.
have to share with you that think about the fact that this super organism known as honeybees, they are highly organized. They provide 5 products for us. Honey, of
Okay.
course, we talked about. Uh, Beeswax, which you can eat as well, but it also is used in candles. We make our own lip balms from the beeswax. They
Okay.
make royal jelly, which is a special food that they create. They have glands behind their head that they feed to the larva, and then the queen bee only gets royal jelly, and that's what makes her develop as a queen. We have realized that royal jelly is really good for our skin, and if you look at your toothpaste tube, a lot of toothpaste now has royal jelly in it because it's good for your gums. They
Oh,
make
wow.
something called Propolis, which is also nicknamed bee glue, where they take sap from pine trees and honeydew from plants, mix it with a little bit of wax, and it's this very sticky substance that scientists are now studying that's antibacterial, antifungal, and it's being used in a lot more things. And then, of course, they also bring in pollen pellets that we can collect to put into smoothies and stuff. But bottom line is, I mean, this insect is making 5 products for us that are super foods and products. Honey
That's
is
amazing.
the most preservable food on this planet. They found it in the ancient pyramids. It is still good, but I do want to let the listeners know that if your honey solidifies, it gets hard, it's not
Yeah.
bad. It just crystallized. And it's still
Okay.
honey. You can spread it in that form, put it in your tea, and it will dissolve. Or if you want it back in the liquid state, just get a hot pan of water and just set the jar down in it. Within an hour or so, it's back to the liquid state.
Because I had some the other day or when I was home 2 weeks ago and it was at the bottom and I couldn't get it out. So
Yeah.
that's what I just knew. Okay.
Yep. Just a
That's good to
little bit of
know.
hot water.
Okay.
But you want to be
Awesome.
careful that it's not too hot because if it's like up in the beyond the boiling point,
Right.
all of those enzymes and wonderful qualities that make it raw honey are gone because in a sense you're processing it. You're
Gotcha.
pasteurizing it in a sense.
Okay. Now, I don't know why this just popped into my head, but I remember reading a story in Fast Company magazine, and this was a while ago. about honey being fake labeled, right? It's coming from another part of the world. And so is that still happening? And
Yeah,
what can we
unfortunately,
do to combat it?
there was a TV show that was on Netflix called Rotten. I don't know if you've heard of it, and it's about our food industry. And the very first episode of season 1 was all about what you're talking about, honey, and it was mainly coming from China. It was not necessarily true honey. And keep in mind, you kind of get what you pay for. If you go to the dollar store to buy honey, it's corn syrup with honey flavoring. If you want to have that local raw, look for the word raw honey, you can get it at the farmer's market, or a lot of supermarkets now are selling more raw honey. But unfortunately, some areas we're taking big vats of sugar water, and the bees will still take that sugar water and they will make honey out of it. But by definition, it's not really honey, because honey is made from the nectar of flowers. Sugar water is a little different than nectar, but it has the same kind of qualities. And so then what they do is pasteurize it so that it couldn't be traced. They could, when they would do the testing on it, they could say it was pasteurized, and then all the things that are there, they can't test it anymore. And unfortunately, that was happening and is still happening. And so a good rule of thumb is you get what you pay for. If the honey price seems quite low, most likely it's not true raw honey.
So, I mean, long story short, buy it directly from a guy or a person in your neighborhood.
And, you're going to pay a little bit more, but think about the fact that you're supporting a local beekeeper. You're supporting local, the very people that are helping that our food industry within your area thrive as well. So yes, buy local is what I always tell people.
That's awesome. And Lynn Wellish just popped in here and said, I have learned so much. And I have too, Lynn. I agree. So Brian, before I sent you my speaker form or my guest form, and what is the best practice that you have seen to create safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences around honey?
So when I was first presented this question, I was kind of like, well, I'm not really, at first I'm like, well, I'm not really part of the food and beverage industry. But then the more I thought about it, I'm like, wait, I'm part of the foundation of the food and beverage industry. And so the fact that I get to be a part of that I am helping to create safe havens for our pollinators that basically help bring our flowers to fruit or to seed that we can plant is a huge part of it. And so, of course, I always am talking about, if you can grow organically, that would be fantastic, because like we talked about earlier, the pesticides don't just take care of the pest insects, but they also can hurt our beneficial insects. And so just, try to keep that in mind. It may be a little bit extra time to pull the weeds out of your garden, but it's better than spraying them with a chemical. Can
you come to my house and tell that to my dad?
Yeah, and why wouldn't you want to get down in the dirt? I mean, I would think that you're gardening because you enjoy it. And so, yeah, there's shortcuts in life, but a lot of times the shortcuts have some negative results.
Exactly. So, I mean, that kind of goes in showing some things of what do you want us to know about this? I'm like, we need to protect our bees.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, I think you were talking to me once, what did I want people to know about me? It's not about me. I tell people all the time, it's about the bees, not the keeper. And I want people to understand that it's when I do presentations with kids, which is my favorite, and I saw you showed some of the pictures, I always ask the kids, have you ever been blamed for something that you didn't do? And of course, you have the one that tells the crazy story about the sibling, and I didn't do this. And I always think of the Brady Bunch of breaking the vase or whatever. And that's a bee's life, because we are constantly like aggravated by the quote unquote bees. When you go to the zoo, around the trash cans, when you're having a picnic, people are like, these bees are so awful. They're not bees. Those are wasp and hornets. And so I always try to be a voice for the bees and help people understand that, especially our native bees and our honeybees, they have a job that they need to do. They are too busy going back and forth, foraging, bringing back the nectar to bother you. They don't really want anything to do with you. They just want flowers. And, we do a lot of conventions and things like that, or festivals, and like the lavender festival. You can go out and cut your own lavender. It's right by our hives. And the bees are all over the lavender. But when people go to that plant to go to cut it, the bees just go to the next one. It's not like they're attacking you because they don't want to do that. And I do want to share, honeybees have a barb on the end of their stinger. When they sting you, they die. So they have to sacrifice themselves in order to defend their hive. And that's the only reason that they really do, or that they're trapped or confused. Unlike wasp and hornets that don't have that barb that can sting repetitively. So when people say, oh, I've been stung by a bee, and I'm like, did you have to get the stinger out? And I'm like, they're like, no. And I'm like, well, then you probably were stung by a wasp. Because if there's no stinger in you, it was a wasp most likely that stung you. And so there's so many things that, people that are misconceptions. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I wish I could help. And I feel like I am making a difference by being a voice, but help people understand those misconceptions about our bees.
That's a huge misconception, because I got stung when I was little and my entire leg swelled up, and that was a wasp and it was not a bee. So, wow. Thank you. And that was a long time ago.
It took this many years to figure out that, huh?
Right. It did. I mean, I have to tell my mom. Now, what's your goal with Bees in the D?
So really our goal,
or what's in the future? Yeah.
Our mission is education and conservation. And so our main goals are just to help educate the next generation about the importance of pollinators so that we can keep them protected. There are some areas around the world right now that they hire people to hand pollinate with a brush because the bees, literally the populations have dropped that much. There are also patents out there of little mini robot drones. I'm not making it up. It's not an episode on Black Mirror, which they did have one about that go and pollinate in fields. But why not just protect the natural way that things are done? And so educating the next generation is very important to us, and to help our numbers increase. And some of the ways that we can do that is, like we said, plant those flowers, way stations. Water is very important. You can put out a bowl of water with rocks in it so they can land and get some water. And support local beekeepers or organizations like ours. And we have an initiative here called the Detroit Bee Highway, where we are putting hives all along, creating a highway in the sky, if you will, but we're the Motor City. So we thought it was kind of fun, where there are way stations for the bees, much like we have rest stops and things like that for humans.
That's so awesome.
Right. So we're trying to create those habitats for the bees. And so that's really the heart of our mission. But we're hoping to push it even further. We're already in schools, and eventually we would like to create the Pollinator Center, where it's a space where people can go, and it's specifically designated to educate about pollinators and their importance.
Okay, so so 3 things popped into my head. We used to see a lot of, at least on I-95, all the wildflowers. And I thought it was one of the president's wives' initiatives to plant the flowers on the highways. Is that not happening anymore? And
no, it is in some areas. There are some areas you'll see a little sign that says this is a native or wildflower area. I just really hope that they continue to expand that. We have tried to work with MDOT here in Michigan about the mowing, because it just breaks my heart to see all that milkweed that our monarchs depend on just being mowed down when there probably are larvae on it. And on top of that, we're using gas resources to do it. And so I love you bringing that up, where we keep more areas that, are let it go natural. Let it be a natural prairie. And even within our yards, there's starting to be more of an initiative, the No Mow May, and letting our yards in certain areas have more natural plants in it, and don't mow quite as often. That's great for water conservation as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's also great for like our lightning or fireflies, because they need that grass. And the more you mow it, the less habitat. And I'm not saying that don't keep it unruly, of course, but just be conscious of that, that, we can move beyond that push in the 50s of the perfect lawn, no dandelions, no anything, it's okay. Plant some more plants. That's beautiful as well.
Exactly. I'm going to have to talk to my dad about that some more, because we need some more flowers.
It's hard but out of fairness, Tracy, it is really hard to change a way that we've always done things.
Right.
And so little initiatives, take a small little 3x3 plot and just plant some natives. Just that little bit would help more than you realize.
So tell me what a native is.
So here in Michigan, you would want to, depending on which state you're in, but in Michigan, you would want to go to a website that helps with natives. So here in Michigan, we've got the coneflower, we've got the columbine, the list goes on and on of so many natives. You just have to be careful. You can still plant plants that aren't native, but you don't want to plant anything that's invasive, that takes over. And so you really want to read tags, study up a little bit before you plant it, because some things will go wild in your yard. If you want it more contained, then maybe get a plant that stays in a cluster. I do a presentation. I'm actually doing one at a library tonight called the Pollinators Garden, where I talk about this a little bit more.
There's two people in my neighborhood that I'm going to make sure watch this, because they're both I think they're both master gardeners in my neighborhood, and they would love this.
I just got my master gardener's certificate this last summer as well.
Oh, congratulations. And I don't know if they officially are, but I think in my eyes they are.
Right. And it's a wonderful program, program.
And I remember my mom had planted parsley in a thing, and caterpillars came and ate the parsley. My mom wanted to kill the caterpillars, and Betty's like, no, give them to me.
Yep, that's a black swallowtail. They love parsley, dill, any of the plants that are in that. So a lot of people are starting to, even if they don't want to eat the dill or the parsley, they're putting it in their yard, because it's kind of a cool ferny looking plant too. Yeah. And then they're helping our butterflies. Right. I'm like, Mom, they're going to turn into, no, they're eating my parsley. But anyways, so my next question was, when you're teaching all these fifth graders, what are their biggest questions about the bees? I'm actually very pleased with the narrative that's happening with bees lately, that bees are they're still feared by many. And I understand, especially like Tracy, if you're allergic, I get it. And nobody likes to be stung. So obviously, I get that. And I respect that. But the narrative lately of saving the bees and helping our bees and our pollinators, it's very encouraging. The amount of kids, Tracy, the other day I received a little Ziploc bag that was full of just coins that a child just collected and wanted to donate to help the bees. Those are the kind of things that keep me going, where it's like, oh my word, that it's hope. It warms your heart. And so the kids are very curious about them. And actually, I love suiting the kids up and taking them into the hives, especially here in the city, because it's so magical to see those fears just start to melt away, especially with honeybees, because they're very docile creatures and they're in a suit as well. So they start really far away and they start inching closer and closer. And before you know it, they're like looking into the hives, want to know more about it. And that's what's exciting for me, the curiosity of kids. But we do a lot of hive tours with adults too, and their curiosity is just as, strong. So those suits really do protect you. They do. And it's ultimately for protection, especially in the face area, because remember, when you're going into their homes, just like if a bear is going in it, they're going to want to go for the nose area and the stuff like that, because it deters the invader, if you will. But with beekeeping, honeybees are so docile, and we use a little bit of smoke to calm them down. I always tell people the suits are kind of overkill, but we always err on the side of safety. It's just like humans. Some humans are crabbier than others, and that's true of bees as well. And so you want better safe than sorry.
Right. Okay, so now I've got two more questions for you. For the meetings industry and meeting planners and ordering food. So do you have any suggestions on what we should do and how we can get more involved in helping the bees?
Well, if they have vendors that are more local and have the ability to provide the amount that's needed, because I understand sometimes the ordering for larger places is significant. And so they may not have the amount, but what you could maybe do is highlight one dish or one thing on the menu that is using local honey. If that beekeeper can't provide the full amount that you would need for everything. And so just bringing attention to a local beekeeper and their efforts is a huge help. I mean, and so, but I also, as much as possible, sourcing out local, of course.
Okay. Awesome. Now, and I almost forgot, this is Pollinator Week.
It is. I've been very busy this week.
That's why we picked this week for you to be on.
Right.
So I have one other question for you, but tell us a little bit about Pollinator Week and what you've been doing.
So it's just a week that is just to bring light to our pollinators. And so far this week, Monday, we did our first honey harvest. We had volunteers and we did a honey harvest of some of the frames from this year, which is always fun. Yesterday, I had another interview, much like this one. And today I'm doing this. Tonight I'm doing a library presentation. Tomorrow we have a really fun dinner with a local brewery, Supernatural, that they took our honey and we're doing like a 7-course meal. And every course, sorry, I got a little frog in my throat. Every course of the meal has our honey in it, including the cocktails. And so that brings light to it as well. And then on Friday, I'm doing some hive tours here in the city as well. So a week full of fun activities.
That's very cool. And I think that everybody needs to know, let's go find our local beekeeper or a local honey person who sells honey. And I guess that would be a beekeeper, right? And see what we can buy from them to help support them.
And you usually can find them at your local farmers markets, or if you go to a grocery store that does a lot of local initiatives, they may have the jars on the shelf as well.
Yep. At where I live in Newbern, North Carolina, there is a family there that's there every single week, and they've got all different kinds of sizes. And I always like to buy it. I'm like, I can't buy it every week because I'm not using that much of it, but that's where I get my honey from for sure. So
wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's so good. It's not that honey bear, right? Like
so actually this last weekend leading up to Pollinator, we team up with a meadery here in Detroit, and we took 7 different honeys and we paired them with a mead so people could taste the different flavors.
Wow.
And that's what makes Bees and the D special too. We have over 70 locations and we don't mix our harvest. So each location is a small batch, and each location has a totally different color and a totally different flavor because of the flowers they go to. And people are blown away with that. But this year we did something really unique. Over the last few years, we've been traveling. I don't do the excursions like the swimming with the dolphins, although I love that. Wherever I travel, I contact the local beekeeper ahead of time, and I beekeep in other countries. And so we've been collecting honey from around the world. So we had honey from Italy, Greece, Thailand, St. Lucia, Argentina. And so we had people taste the different honeys from different parts of the world. And it went all the way from honey that's so light you can see through it to honey that's like molasses that tastes like
Really?
molasses and is super dark.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. And now I'm thinking meeting planners. This is a really cool interactive dinner.
Oh
To
yeah,
have.
we do lots of dinners and honey samplings here in Detroit. We do it with the Whitney, which is a classic restaurant here up at Blake's Cider Mill, which is a big cider place here. And it's so fun. And what I do is I will then educate. See, I figured out the combo to helping to educate adults: alcohol. If you have a drink that's there, and they will, if you pour it, they will come. And then I can educate them. But I do have to tell you one other collaboration we do that is just out of this world. So we have beehives up on the old Stroh's ice cream plant.
Okay.
Now it is a distillery, Detroit City Distillery, where they make bourbon. So we take 55 gallons of honey from the hives, and we put it in a bourbon barrel for 3 months, and we let it age and take on that flavor of the bourbon. And then we bottle that up, and then they put the bourbon back in. And so we make a bourbon honey, and they make a honey bourbon. And every Black Friday we do this. We did 500 jars last year and sold out in 2 hours.
Wow.
It's people email us almost daily asking, when is it coming out? When is it coming out? And that bourbon honey drizzled over ice cream or on waffles, I'm telling you, it is amazing.
Okay, so I have to buy that for my parents and my brother. So you need to let me
Black
know.
Friday, you can pre-order online. The only hard part, Tracy, is with the liquor. We can't sell that. They have to. And I don't think it can be shipped. So you have to come and visit, and I'll suit you up and take you in the hives.
Okay.
I know you're allergic, but I will make sure that I keep you nice and safe.
Well, thank you. But I think I'm allergic to a wasp and not a bee. So
usually you're allergic to both if you are. But.
Okay. So, oh my gosh, I have learned so much from you, Brian. This has been so fascinating. And my question that I ask everybody before we leave is, what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience mean to you? And I think you've done that through this entire hour, but can you summarize it a little?
I think the main thing for me is to remember that, when we think of food and beverage, we're thinking of that food and beverage that's right in front of us. But to remember that it starts way before that. And just like you wouldn't want chemicals on your dinner table or around your food, then why would you want those kind of chemicals around the beginning of your food? Does that kind of make sense?
Yep, it does.
And so think back to the roots of where that food is coming from, and make sure that we're also having, sustainable and safe practices there, as well as where the food is being served.
Oh, that's so poignant. It really is. And I thank you so much for just going to that gardening club meeting and falling in love with flowers and beekeeping.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, the generosity and kindness of one group of individuals helped make all of this happen. And that's a lesson right there as well. Support people, build people up, because you may be inspiring somebody to be a change maker, to do something like we're doing, where we're passionate and we know the importance of this.
Exactly. I mean, and so thank you to those ladies and that organization, fantastic. And thank you for doing what you're doing, because little did we know that we need to know this. Right.
Yeah. And thank you for letting me be a voice for the bees, because, people need to hear this, and it's fun to learn about this as well.
It really is. And I think we need to do a lot more of that. So thank you very much. And everybody, I hope that you've learned something. Lynn, thank you for joining us. I know somebody else was on here as well. Thank you for joining us for Eating at a Meeting. Brian, kudos to you. And I look forward to staying in touch with you for sure. And
yes, please.
Yes. And Brian DeSandy, or the Huntington Place. Thank you. So Greg DeSandy. I just put your names together. Thank you for introducing me to Brian.
Yeah, I love
Everybody,
it. This little networking that happens. It's awesome.
yeah, they were, and I actually met them at the Professional Convention Management Managers Association convention, and they were promoting the honey in Detroit. That was
Yeah,
their entire
yeah.
booth was designed around the bees. So thank you so much, Visit
It's such a
Detroit, for that.
positive and sweet point for Detroit. And just know too, Tracy, that at our website that you shared,
Mhm.
beesandthebee.com, I have a lot more educational videos and what flowers to plant and different kinds of bees. And I even made a bunch of lessons for parents and teachers under Bees and the Bee
Awesome.
Junior during the pandemic that you can do with your families as well.
Okay, fantastic. So everybody, that there again, here is the website beesinthed.com. Definitely go visit it and share it with your school teachers that you know as well. So until next time, stay safe and eat well. Thanks everybody for listening.